This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
What's up, Detroit sports fans? Welcome to the Fan Reporter Show, made by fans for fans, powered by the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I'm Nick, and joining me today is Andrew, who's going to give us this week's topics.
Well, Detroit, it finally happened. I think you know what we're talking about. Let's just, you know what we're going to rap about today. We're not, no point trying to hide it. Let's get into it. It's a Fan Report.
All right. Well, I guess we should start with the game. Or you know what? Let me do this. let me do this. Oh, what a rough start.
The game doesn't even matter anymore.
No, it really doesn't. But I feel like we do have to talk about it because it does kind of lead into some of the later conversations and also raises some more questions as well. Just because of what we could be looking at next year and what the replacement GM and head coach could be coming into. But let me actually start by saying this. Andrew, how was your Thanksgiving?
That's a good way to start. No, it was good. We spent it with the parents. We decided not to go the turkey route, and we just kind of roasted a chicken instead. But it was a good roast. I melted some butter, mixed it with some olive oil, some lemon, some salt, rubbed it all over the turkey.
Did you You didn't have a turkey. You had
chicken. Sorry.
Did you shove the lemon inside its butt?
Yes.
Did you put a beer can inside its butt?
I did not.
Oh, you got to do the beer can chicken, man.
But, you rub it with garlic, some rosemary, some oregano. Like, I didn't go too overboard with it. I got some chili powder on there. I wanted to do like a full blown like Cajun rub chicken, but I couldn't get the parents to sign off on it, and obviously I'm not the only one eating, so so I had to go pretty conservative with it. But it turned out pretty good, and we had some mashed potatoes, and it was good. But it was a fairly relaxing Thanksgiving. Probably the most, and honestly, it was a good year for it to be that way because I had so much to do in terms of school. So this is one of those years where if we actually had Thanksgiving with people, I may not have been able to go. So
ouch. At least you stuck with poultry. There is that.
There we go. Is it blasphemous that I didn't do turkey?
I mean, traditionally speaking, yes. But in all reality,
I would have been eating turkey for a week straight if I did.
Right, but no, in all reality, I mean, not necessarily, because you could have gone the route that my girlfriend and I went, because we just had our own Thanksgiving with the two of us and our two dogs at home, just because we wanted to, avoid people. We wanted to avoid people with the whole COVID situation going on. We were good. And we went and just air fried a couple of turkey legs.
Oh, there you go.
We seasoned them up, put a bunch of different seasonings on them, some poultry type seasoning, some thyme, some black pepper, salt, a little bit of garlic powder, some rosemary. We rubbed that all in and air fried them, and came out actually pretty good. I enjoyed it a lot, actually. And in all reality, technically speaking, yes, traditionally it is blasphemous not to do turkey on Thanksgiving, but I think just about everybody in the world agrees that turkey is probably one of the worst parts about Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
I do it as just like a it's almost what's the word I'm looking for?
You're obligated.
Yeah.
You're obligated. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy Thanksgiving turkey. Like the turkey I had last year.
It's a formality. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for.
There you go. Yes. The turkey I had last year, I went down to Florida for a Friendsgiving last year, kind of mid-November. And the turkey we had during that was amazing. It was, honest to God, one of the best turkeys I've ever had. And I loved it. And I knew, but then again, I knew never again would I ever get a turkey that good. But I enjoy turkey. I do. Mm-hmm. I prefer having turkey sandwiches with real turkey. Like that, that always hits well. That always hits.
Oh, absolutely.
Different than just that cold cut type turkey that's all processed and fake. But in general, turkey's a dry, stringy, bland, gross bird. So it's really not very good. So can't really fault you for not having turkey. I can't. Yeah. We went turkey leg route because dark meat's better than light meat when it comes to turkey, in my opinion. And we didn't really want to have too many leftovers. I mean, we had a bunch of mashed potato leftovers, sweet potato leftovers, green bean casserole leftovers, all the normal sides, but we didn't really have all that much turkey leftover. So it kind of worked out to what we wanted, what we were aiming at doing.
Yeah, like I think our portion control at our house was actually like almost spot on. We had just enough for leftovers the second day, and that was it. Like
that's pretty much how it was with us too. We did a pretty good job with that. But because
I wanted to make my mac, but I found out I'd be the only one eating it. So I'm like, all right, I don't want to gain 15 pounds.
Oh, the mac and cheese that we always make.
Oh yeah.
Oh God, that stuff's so good.
Oh. When I found out I'd be the only one eating it, I'm like, okay, we'll forego.
I couldn't convince her to allow me to do the mac and cheese. I was disappointed. But, well, the reason was, this is the reason why I was told no on the mac. Because she says it's not a side dish of Thanksgiving.
Okay, see, that's bull. Mac is 100% a Thanksgiving side dish.
See, that's what I said. It's a staple of Black Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
It is. It is.
It's true.
It should be a staple in everybody's Thanksgiving.
We're not quite that demographic, but it's true.
No, but it should be a staple in everybody's Thanksgiving.
I agree.
But
I would do that Thanksgiving 100 times out of 100.
But honestly, though,
give me a soul food Thanksgiving every time.
Oh God, yes. It honestly wasn't a bad Thanksgiving. It was a far more relaxed one. I was able to actually get work done around the house that I had been wanting to get done. I was able to. We just got a new Ring doorbell. I was able to hang that up a lot easier than I expected it to be. I was able to put up the Christmas lights. So I was, I said I wanted to do them a little bit earlier this year because one, I'm putting them up myself, so I didn't want to do it when it was 20 degrees out. That would have been miserable. So I was like, you know what? I'm doing it a little bit earlier than I normally do, and there we go. So, but it was.
Did you do like all around the house, or like just on the bushes, or
no? We have like an awning out front of our house, and I did it on that pretty much. So around our porch, basically.
You guys already put your tree up?
No, we have not. We have not yet.
Did that this weekend?
That's coming up next. That is coming up next. I think we're actually going to be doing that on Tuesday.
Oh,
I think that is coming this week. But it was a different Thanksgiving, but it was also kind of relaxing and refreshing, I guess.
You know what? You know what wasn't different about this Thanksgiving? The Lions lost.
No, that's actually pretty spot on. That there's nothing.
They gave us
a
little bit of that Thanksgiving tradition. That they preserved that for us.
That they did. They did preserve that one tradition. It's not a Thanksgiving without a Lions loss, and they did it in typical Lions fashion, getting blown out, making a quarterback look like the next coming of Brett Favre. Or Joe Montana, Steve Young, insert Hall of Famer here.
Let's be honest. We all knew going in Deshaun Watson was going to tear us up.
I mean, yes. Yes, you're not wrong.
But, I mean, the complete lack of any presence in the secondary was just appalling.
Like when Will Fuller was able to straight up waltz into the end zone on their little flea flicker play that they ran.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks combined for 250 yards. I mean,
yeah,
geez.
That's rough. It was not a good day at the office for the Lions secondary. Let's be real. I know they were
fooled by AP's 2 touchdowns. We still didn't have a run game.
Like, don't get me wrong. I will say though, AP was running like he was youthful on Thanksgiving. He looked youthful on some plays. Yes. Don't get me wrong. I understand the Lions are very short-handed when it came to injuries on both sides of the football, missing both Galladay and Swift on offense, missing Big Daddy V on the right side of the line, Vaitai, and then on defense you were missing Jeff Okudah. You were missing Desmond Trufant played, but he got torched quite a bit as per usual.
He made one good play.
He did make one good play. One good play. And it was honestly rough. Amani Aruarie was able to hold Brandon Cooks at least a little bit in that game. He didn't allow a massive play and have him blow up like Desmond Trufant did with Will Fuller.
I was on record thinking Brandon Cooks was going to have a bigger game than he ended up I thought they were both going to have big games.
I was
Cooks.
too, and
I liked Cooks as the value play in DFS because I thought they're both going to have big games.
right. I expected the same thing. I thought both guys were going to have great games, and I thought Cooks was going to torch us for like 120 yards and holding them to 85. Albeit that's still a solid game for.
Yeah, I just would have been happy if he just added a
zone.
touchdown to that, and that'd have been nice.
If he would have just had one of Will Fuller's two, why couldn't he share?
It was hilarious. I was watching the game with my dad, and my dad loves to ask me every week, like, who you got in this game? Who do you have in this game? So we were watching the game, and, like, he was noticing that I wasn't seeming too upset whenever, like, something would happen good, like, for the Texans. And he goes, who do you have in this game, Andrew? And I'm like, oh, let's see. Deshaun Watson, Brandon Cooks, Jordan Akins, Texans defense.
You know what's funny about that is my girlfriend watched a little bit of the game with me too, and she was saying the same thing. Why are you cheering when a Texans player does well? And I'm like, well,
Kind of heavy on the Texans today.
I had a little bit of a twofold reason why I wanted the Texans to do well. One was because of fantasy, and two, I had a strong inkling. Yes, I had a strong inkling something was gonna happen. There was gonna be a change if the Lions lost that game.
When I saw that picture of Martha Ford with her head in her hands.
Oh, God, on the Will Fuller touchdown.
I knew it was coming. I'm like, it's got to be coming now. It's got to be.
Her reaction with her face in her hands. I was like, yep, she understands. That is the pain that a Lions fan has felt for many, many years, and she finally understands it.
There was only one moment of slight excitement for me from the Lions in this game, and that was when Jamal Agnew came so close to hitting Matthew Stafford in the end zone for a touchdown.
And that would have been that was thrown into double coverage. Yeah. And Stafford almost made it an insane catch. Would have been the best pass catcher for the Lions on the day.
But by far the funniest part of this game was the comedy of errors in terms of turnover after turnover after. It's like no one wanted the ball.
It was bad. It was bad. The amount of fumbles in this game was ridiculous. It was an ugly game. I mean, they.
At one point, the Lions had like 8 plays and 3 turnovers. Like it was.
I mean, let's call it for what it is. I mean, obviously this was a game where we ended up seeing the head coach and GM get fired as a result in Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn, which we had been clamoring for the better part of over a year now. Let's be real. And it's finally happened. But in my opinion, and I kind of want to dive into this actually a little bit after, but it also raises some questions about some other players in the team and whether or not they should be brought back as well. One in particular, but we'll get into that after we talk about the coach and GM. I mean, is there anything really to take from this game just because of where we are now and what we're looking for towards the future? I mean, you can honestly take a look at the season and say it's over, right? There is no hope for the playoff anymore. Have they even announced an interim coach?
Yeah, Darren Bevel.
Oh, it is Darrell Bevel. Okay, I'm kind of surprised that they aren't giving it to the special teams coordinator because he's been kind of a hot name as a potential candidate to replace Matt Patricia as a head coach.
I just haven't seen who's replacing Bevel as defensive coordinator.
Offensive coordinator.
Sorry, offensive coordinator.
He's probably going to pull double duty in all reality.
Think so?
Yeah, I a lot of times when you see an OC come in like that, they are going to be still calling plays in offense. They'll probably just promote the quarterback's coach technically to OC, but Bevel's still going to be the one calling the plays. I guess there's really not much to talk about anymore at the game, just because it was what it was. We saw Deshaun Watson straight up take the Lions to school. We saw the Lions offense just be totally inept at putting points in the board and gaining yards, and there just wasn't anything really to write home about. So let's just go ahead and get on into the coaching situation. Yeah. So what was your immediate reaction?
Glee. It was like a sigh of relief. It felt like just this giant weight off our shoulders. And then after I finally had time to process it, my next reaction was like, what a waste of a season. Because this should have happened last year.
I mean, we knew this is what was going to happen. I mean, and here was my reaction, just to give you an idea. Wait, it didn't work. Why didn't it work? No.
I was like, am I supposed to wait for something? What's happening?
I got it now. Here we go. Here was my reaction. Take 2.
very faint, but we could hear it.
Well, the recording can hear it a lot better. Let me tell you. Yes, that was my first and second reaction when I had time to take it in as well. I like I had mentioned, this was something that I have been asking for over a year now. I've wanted Matt Patricia gone. I wanted Bob Quinn gone, and I even was willing to hang on. Like, I was a little bit more on the fence about Bob Quinn because there have been a few grabs in the draft that I've been impressed with. However, the total body of work for him was awful, and no way around that. So I wanted them both gone. I'm very happy they're both gone, and now I finally feel like we can turn the page. I just feel like you said, I feel like it's 11 weeks too late, that this was a waste of a season. This was a waste of what could have been trade potential, trade value for some of the players on this team, like a Matthew Stafford, someone in that realm, where does the next guy want to go with him? And so it also puts us kind of behind the ball a little bit on going after the next head coach and the next GM. This does allow us to get ahead of things, so to speak, because we are able to now take a look at the coaching search, take a look at a GM search. Obviously, you want to go with the GM first and then the head coach. And obviously, everybody knows it's going to happen, even though it is considered, quote unquote, tampering. There are probably going to be some backdoor conversations with a few of the candidates and seeing interest and gauging things out there.
Early name I've heard for our coaching candidates is the Kansas City offensive coordinator, for example.
Eric Bieniemy, I think his name is. Yeah. I really don't know how to pronounce it, I guess.
But
Bieniemy, I guess is how you would pronounce it.
One person I thought summed up my feelings on this very well, and it was someone I retweeted on our Twitter page at Real Fan Report. It was Michael David Smith. He's a managing editor for Pro Football Talk. He said, "This is such a wasted year for the Lions. It was so obvious they needed to move on from Matt Patricia last year, but they kept him, and they catered their personnel moves to Patricia's priorities, and now they're in a deeper hole. Just imagine the Lions had fired Patricia, hired Eric Bieniemy, drafted either Tua or Herbert, whoever Bieniemy preferred, and made this the year to develop the young QB with Stafford as a starter, the same way the Chiefs did with Mahomes and Alex Smith."
Bieniemy, that's how you pronounce it.
Yep.
No, and it really does feel like a wasted year, and that quote is entirely spot on. And the reason is because, thinking about it, looking at last year, they were able to hide behind the fact that Matthew Stafford went down after week 8 or during week 8, one of the two. And they were looking at a record that was 3-4-1 at that point. So they weren't even 500 at that point, or 3-3-1 after week 7. They weren't even, they were like a 500 team with all firing on all cylinders. Matthew Stafford playing MVP type football. Your defense was a joke. I mean, it just, you weren't a good football team then. So, and then you look at what the team was after Stafford went down, and you really saw the holes on the way that roster was built. You saw them come shine into the spotlight at that point, where you don't have talent on this roster on either side of the football. Yeah. So for the ownership and to see this and take a look at the GM and coach and say, "Oh, we're only this bad and we only lost every game the rest of the way because we didn't have our quarterback." Look at teams this year. Panthers have won ball games without their quarterback and Teddy Bridgewater. They beat us without their quarterback. They started an XFL quarterback against us and won. They almost beat the Vikings today, and the Vikings are red hot. And then you look at the Saints. They're winning without even a true quarterback back there. They got a running back there in Taysom Hill. There's several teams that have won. The Saints, when Teddy Bridgewater was starting just last year, they were winning ball games. So for the Lions ownership group to take a look at this, see other teams doing it without their starting quarterback, and say, "Hey, these are the guys that we want to helm this ship, to be in charge, to continue building this roster and then leading this roster." It really was a wasted year because there were so many holes to fill. And, I'll admit, I bought into the hype a little bit of the possibility of going worst to first and looking at the 49ers and saying, "Hey, that could be us this year." I bought into that a little bit. But at the same time, I also said that I don't think this team is very good either. I believe I said 6-10, 7-9 was probably where they were going to be.
That's what we both said. it's annoying because you look at all those reports that came out around the draft, how the Lions draft room, I guess there was like disagreement about who to draft, and some people wanted to, but for some reason, Matt Patricia or Bob Quinn that wanted Okuda?
It was probably both of them because there
was a disagreement between the two of them. One of them wanted Okuda, one of them wanted Tua. I think it was Bob Quinn that wanted Okuda, and he just went against the war room basically and drafted Okuda, thinking that that's like the guy.
And in all reality, he's not been good. He's been a bad pick so far.
That whole situation could have been avoided, and we could have had a more competent draft had we hopefully could have had a more competent draft had we gotten rid of them last year.
Do you think that if they had gone to a Tonga Vailoa and this team essentially had the same season that they're having now, do you think Patricia and Bob Quinn would have returned? Saying, hey, we've got our quarterback of the future. No?
Because the caveat was you have to be playoff contenders.
Yeah, but
regardless of who you're drafting.
Right, but could you make the argument that they would say, and that Sheila Ford would say, okay, I see we got our quarterback of the future. I understand that. Maybe I'll give you guys another shot. Maybe I'll give you another year with this new quarterback. There is that. I still think no, and I still would say no, just because of the fact that we've seen other coaches go into situations with a quarterback taken by the previous regime and roll with it. But either way, I'm definitely glad that we've moved past them. They weren't successful, and I wanted to kind of hit.
That's an understatement.
Right, and I wanted to kind of hit a couple of the potential candidates that the Lions could be looking at.
Okay. There was one part I wanted to go over real quick before we got to the candidates, though.
Yeah.
And it was another reason why I think that Patricia should have been fired earlier, and that is just the general reaction around the league from former Lions players of him being fired. Like Darius Slay quoted a tweet that said, "My boy Big Play straight trying to tell y'all," and Slay quoted saying, "I was the problem, though." Former linebacker Stephen Tulloch said it's the best news he's heard all year. City Detroit and fans deserve so much better. Ashawn Robinson said, "You get what you deserve," saying he told me my career would be taken away from me, but I guess they have other plans for you. Ziggy Ansah said, "Welp." And Eric Ebron said about to text Bob Quinn, see if he's straight, with a laughing emoji. It looks like no one has sympathy for these two. So but the reports that came up about how Patricia treated players, and this is the first I'm hearing about him telling Ashawn Robinson that he can take his career away from you. Like, that's not something you say to a player.
I mean, let's be real here. We heard about a couple of situations where Matt Patricia rubbed some players the wrong way, and we know if he did it to a couple of guys, he probably did it to a lot more.
Yeah,
Ebron said it. Slay said it. There's a number of players out there that have said that Matt Patricia doesn't treat his players with respect. And
like when Caldwell left, there were players that were upset about it.
There's still players that are upset about it and say that he should be there.
No one that I've seen is upset about Patricia.
No, I don't think anybody is. And I guess I could kind of say we kind of saw this coming. From pretty much training camp day 1, day 2, whatever. He came in and was screaming and yelling at players and making them run too much and whatever, and was overly harsh on these players from the very beginning.
Yeah.
He was rubbing players the wrong way from the very beginning. So it kind of set the tone very early on what this situation was going to be, and you saw it. None of the players ever really bought in to Matt Patricia as the head coach here. And a lot of that has to do with the way he treated them.
And there's no telling the damage they did by shipping out really key guys like Quandre Diggs, like
locker room leaders.
Yeah, like Darius Slay, like Golden Tate.
Locker room leaders and getting rid of them.
But yeah, as you're going into candidates.
Well, before we do that, actually, I wanted to kind of go in our time machine a little bit here and go back to when we were looking at hiring a head coach after Jim Caldwell and looking at some of the other candidates that we had potentially.
I'll be the first to admit I wanted Patricia.
I did too. I thought Patricia was a solid hiring. I was in the belief that I wanted an offensive mind just because that's the way I believe the NFL is now. That you need an offensive-minded head coach if you really want to be successful, unless you are getting the next I don't know, the next Bill Belichick or something. I don't know. But I just feel like an offensive-minded head coach is the way to go. Look at the Rams and Sean McVay. Look at the Cardinals and Cliff Kingsbury and Andy Reid and the Chiefs and how successful they've been. But some of the other candidates that were out there and looking at the levels of success they've had, Mike Vrabel.
Oh, yeah.
Went to the AFC Championship with the Titans last year. He's got another team that could potentially... They are atop the AFC South, if I recall. They might be a half game back or game back at this point. But the Tennessee Titans, Mike Vrabel helped revive Ryan Tannehill's career. And now they're a perennial contender in the AFC.
And what was the Tennessee Titans record when Mike Vrabel took over?
That I don't know, but not good.
9-7.
9-7. Okay.
Just like the Lions.
All right. So it wasn't that bad. Matt Nagy.
I was just drawing the comparison there.
Right. Matt Nagy for the Bears, 25-17. Now, their offense is a dumpster fire, but they've got a really good defense in Chicago, and that team seems to continue to be contending for a division title year in and year out. They're 5-5 this year, but they technically are still in playoff contention, but that team is a little bit underperforming. Frank Reich with the Indianapolis Colts, 24-18. There's another team continuously and repeatedly contending for the AFC title, and they've got some of the best talent on the defense side of the football, and Darius Leonard, and even on offense, they've got some talent there as well, and they're looking like they're trying to win now also.
They went from 4-12 to 10-6 the season that Frank Reich took over.
Yep, John Gruden, which I wouldn't even consider him a candidate.
A lot of people here wanted him.
Right. But, I mean, and that's really the only names I'm going to mention, but you had opportunity to get some of these names, and they chose not to, and they chose to go with Matt Patricia, and it's not like, and Mike Vrabel is the one that I really want to key into because he's got the Patriot connection. He was the Patriots DC after Matt Patricia, I believe. No, I believe he was part of the Patriots defensive situation, the defensive coaching staff with the Patriots, but he's also a Patriot linebacker for many, many years. So if you wanted to continue with the quote-unquote Patriot way, he could have been the guy, and he's a far better head coach. Yeah. But now let's go ahead and move back into present day and look at some potential candidates for the GM position. Some of the names that I've seen, the hot names that the hottest name I've seen thrown out there is ESPN analyst Louis Riddick. I'm curious to get your thoughts on what you think Louis Riddick would be able to bring, and whether or not you think that would be a solid hire for the Lions to make.
I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I don't know who that is. I've seen him on TV, but I don't know who he is in terms of a football mind. He hasn't coached anywhere as far as I know.
Well, let me give you an idea of what he's done for the Washington football team.
I know he's a former player.
Formerly known as the Redskins. He was their pro scout from 01 to 04. He was the director of pro personnel from 05 to 07. He was the Eagles pro scout in 08, assistant director of pro personnel in 09, and director of pro personnel for the Eagles in 2010, 2013. So he has scouting expertise, and he's got a lot of experience in that realm. And he is known as being one of the guys that really could. He's been a name that is thrown out there every single time a GM position comes available. He is one of the hottest names on the market every single time, almost every single year whenever a GM position's available. And so he's a guy that a lot of people are really into replacing Bob Quinn. He knows the players. He's got a lot of rapport with players. He was a player, so he's got a lot of respect there. And he's got an eye for talent as well. So there, there's.
I've said before, I like former players in personnel positions because I do feel like they have that influence, and they just tend to know the game a bit better. But I guess I don't. From that rundown you gave me, I guess I don't hate it. I don't have any reason to really stick strongly by Louis Riddick as the pick for the new GM, but I guess I don't hate it. I don't see. I mean, there obviously is a downside, but I don't see too much risk. There's nothing glaring that I'm like, ooh, I don't like that. You know what I'm saying?
Right, and yeah. I like I said, I like the possibilities of Riddick. He just doesn't have. He's been out of the game a long time in terms of being a pro scout. He's just an analyst and has been since 2013. So it's been a while since he's been on that side of the desk. So I'd be curious to see if he'd be able to pick it up that quickly again. But One of the other names that I do want to mention is Ed Dodds, the Indianapolis Colts VP of Player Personnel and Assistant GM. There's one that's honestly, he's also worked with the Seattle Seahawks before the Colts, and there's one of the guys that I would say is one of my top candidates, and the reason is because he's got the reputation as a super solid nose for talent or eye for talent. He's been a really key right-hand man for a couple of top-notch GMs, as well as he's known as being a great drafter, and that's something that the Lions desperately need, is someone with a nose for talent and able to get the right guys in the draft, because that's something that we've failed at in this city for a long, long time now.
That's exactly, because it reminds you of Troy Weaver and a guy that has an eye for talent, and like you said, he's overseen a lot of great draft picks for the Colts in recent years. The Colts have been one of the best drafting organizations in recent years, so this kind of almost reminds me of a Troy Weaver type play at assistant GM. And these are, again, aside from players, these are the types of guys that I think are fit for GM roles, are the guys who really have an eye for talent. I do like Ed Dodds here.
And the final name I wanted to bring up is John Dorsey, former Kansas City Chiefs and Cleveland Browns general manager. This one's a little bit interesting because I don't know if he'd even be interested in doing it, but he might. But he had a hand in 3 Super Bowl champions and had his fingerprints all over two really exciting teams that this year, the way that the rosters are built in both Cleveland and Kansas City. He drafted guys like Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill. He also was the GM when guys like Baker Mayfield, Denzel Ward, Nick Chubb were drafted as well. So he delivered the draft. He got the draft picks for the draft to bring in guys like Pat Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, etc. And then he was the GM when drafting Baker Mayfield, Denzel Ward, Nick Chubb. So, and he also traded for key guys like Jarvis Landry. And I'm grabbing some of these quotes from heavy.com, but he's a name that is one that's kind of interesting as well, because he's one of the only names that we've mentioned or the only name I would argue that I would say that has actual GM experience.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are. Would you rather go for someone like a John Dorsey who has a lot more experience in the role of GM, or would you like a guy like Ed Dodds who doesn't necessarily have the GM experience, but is a name that is kind of up and coming and could be the next big thing at the GM position?
I definitely lean more the Ed Dodds type. I'm more about trying to find diamonds in the rough at the GM position rather than seasoned guys. I like shooting for the stars, and that's something that I think Ed Dodds brings. There's one guy though that I was kind of waiting for you to mention that you didn't mention. And it's a guy that just seems to get brought up every time there's a GM search anywhere, and that's the Vikings assistant GM George Patton. He's been again, like I said, it feels like every time that there's a GM opening, a lot of teams try to court him, and at this point, it just seems to me like he just either doesn't want to leave the Vikings or he's just waiting for the right opportunity. I don't know if he'd be interested in coming to Detroit, but the Vikings are, I still believe, a very well-run organization, and he's been the assistant through it all. He's been a scout for them for 23 years too. So,
I mean, that's a name that he's obviously got a ton of experience finding some talent. Mm-hmm. He has been involved in guys like Dalvin Cook, Alexander Mattison, bringing in Kirk Cousins, guys like Justin Jefferson Thielen, yes. So there obviously is a lot of success in his arsenal there. So that is a name that we could take a look at, and I definitely wouldn't hate the idea at all.
Oh, I said there was one question I had for you, but finish your thought.
No, go ahead. I mean, I was just going to say that I still kind of lean Ed Dodds just because I like the way the Colts are constructed, and I think there's a lot of potential with him. But go ahead and shoot with the question.
So for whatever GM does come in here, would you want to see them go the Troy Weaver route of just firing this entire team out of a cannon and going from there and just rebuilding from the ground up?
I think there's a couple of guys I would want to keep. I think that the offensive line, at least the left side of the offensive line, has been built actually pretty solidly.
So far Weaver's kept Derrick Rose and Blake Griffin and Svi and Saku, but that's about it.
Right. I think there's a couple of, obviously more than a couple, there's a few names in this roster that I would like to keep. I'd like to extend guys like Kenny Galladay. I would like to keep That, like I mentioned, the left side of the offensive line. I would like to
keep Galladay, Swift.
Galladay and Swift, yes. I'd even keep Carrion. I'd give him one more go as a third down back, as potentially a change of pace type guy. Those are a couple of guys that I want to keep. And honestly, I'd keep some of the younger guys. Amani Arawarie, keep giving them a shot. Deshaun Hand, give him a shot. Romeo Quara, I like. There's a couple of names out there that I would want them to keep and build with and see what we got there. So. Yeah.
Well, obviously, with the NFL, it's a little different in terms of you can't just completely overhaul your entire team like Troy Weaver did with the Pistons. Right.
But tear down and build up a roster pretty effectively, though.
That's what I was curious about. Like, who would you keep? Like, would you keep a guy like Stafford around at least till we find another QB, or are you just trying to get as much as you can for him right now?
Well, I actually will get into that after we go through the coaching candidates, because that's actually going to be the next part of this topic for me here. But so I'll answer that question in a few minutes. But
nice tease.
So
all right.
I wanted to switch on over to the coaching candidates, and there's really a few that are big names here, and guys that I want them to go after. The biggest name for me that is my favorite candidate is Eric Bieniemy. He's part of the Andy Reid coaching tree, which the Andy Reid coaching tree has been extremely successful. There's been a lot of success from Andy Reid's coaching tree, and including Super Bowls. So it's far more successful than the Bill Belichick coaching tree. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Bieniemy has been right underneath Andy Reid and has been at the helm of the best offense in the league for a few years now. I think if the Lions don't get him, someone else is going to. He's a guy who I think you throw the book at and try to bring in. He's going to write this offense and probably make, if they do end up keeping Stafford, probably turn him into a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback. He's just a guy that I think would be awesome to see come around. I think it would be just a totally different mindset for the Lions, totally different look. It would rejuvenate this team and give them something for the fans to be excited about, bringing in Eric Bieniemy, and it would also help on keeping guys like Kenny Galladay around as well, because again, that's a name that seemingly knows what he's doing and looks like he's going to be a really good head coach in this league. And so Eric Bieniemy, I think, would be a really successful hiring for a lot of reasons, and I think he would be a guy I would love to see right this ship 100%.
I agree with you. I think Eric Bieniemy is the guy here, and part of the reason that I'm happy that we finally got rid of Patricia and Bob Quinn, at least when we did now, better late than never, is because, again, like you said, you can't tamper anything, but this puts us at, I feel like puts us at the front of the line in terms of trying to land Bieniemy as a head coach. Like we're, I believe, the first head coaching vacancy right now.
No, Texans. Bill O'Brien fired a few weeks ago.
Oh, yep. Forgot about Bill O'Brien.
That's going to be, in my opinion, the Texans' head coaching position is going to be the one that's going to be the toughest to compete against, because they've got a superstar quarterback in Deshaun Watson. Mm-hmm. They've got a solid offense already. He
can already run his offense with the Texans.
Right, and that's the scary part of not being able to get a guy like Eric Bieniemy is that offense is already ready built, and maybe a few tweaks here and there, and he's just got to bring in someone to focus on the defense and have that GM build the defense. So that's a team that's going to be tough to compete against, because there is a lot more talent there and a lot more ready to go. So, but Eric Bieniemy is the top candidate for me, 100%. My second candidate, honestly, is Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator for the 49ers. Dearborn native.
Yes.
He grew up in the area, and he knows the city all too well and knows the struggles of a Lions fan. I'd love to see Robert Saleh come here and come back home and right this ship. I think he's a guy who has got a really good head on his shoulders and is going to be a really good head coach in the NFL. And I know I said I want an offensive-minded guy, but I think he's going to. But Robert Saleh is kind of an exception, because I think he's a guy who's going to have the fans behind him from the very beginning, being a hometown guy, and I think that's something really important in this town in particular.
Two very different directions, though. One offensive-minded guy, one defensive-minded guy.
Right, and it is two very different directions. But Robert Saleh is a guy who is a hot name at the head coaching market. He made the defensive side of the 49ers just a stalwart. They're very tough to play up against, and he was at the helm of that. And he's been able to take a team that has been through a lot of problems and gone through a lot of injuries and everything and turn right the ship there and keep things trucking along. So I think Robert Saleh has the potential to be a really good head coach, especially for a team like the Lions having that hometown connection. But what are your thoughts on Robert Saleh? It sounded like you were a little bit excited there.
Yeah, this is a guy that I've wanted ever since halfway through Patricia's 10 years Lions head coach when I jumped ship on him. I was ready for us to move on and try to court Robert Saleh. Yeah, I think part of the reason I love Saleh is not just because of how well his defenses have all performed. He seems like he sweats, bleeds, breathes football. Like the passion he exudes in the sideline is something that I love, and it's something that I liked about Jim Schwartz. I just wanted to reel it in terms of the players, but it was something I liked about Jim Schwartz, and it's something I do kind of want to have back on the sidelines. As someone who's a little more passionate, a little more fiery, and just can kind of breathe new life into what feels like a dead product right now. So yeah, I do love the Robert Saleh pick. I would love Eric Bieniemy too. I just have you bring up a good point that the Texans are just more suited for him, and I am worried that he would likely choose the Texans over us. There's one other name.
It's a better job. It's what it is. It's a better job.
There's one other name though that has caught my eye, and that's the Bills offensive coordinator Brian Daboll. In his tenure, the Bills have really improved on offense a lot, and especially since Josh Allen joined the team this season. They're scoring 27.2 points per game, and not to mention Josh Allen has been having an insane year. Absolutely. So he has already shown that he has an ability to develop quarterbacks, because going in, no one expected everyone thought Josh Allen was going to be a project. And no one expected him to be anything for at least a few years. And he kind of immediately stepped in. He was decent his first season, really stepped up his second season. So I think Daboll checks a lot of boxes that we're looking for Detroit, because Detroit's going to be a team that's in the near future going to have a new quarterback under center. And one of the things we're going to need out of a head coach is someone who knows how to develop quarterback talent. I think Brian Daboll checks that box.
I like Brian Daboll a lot, actually. And the reason is he was able to take a quarterback in Josh Allen that, I'll be honest, I did not have a lot of belief could be a successful NFL quarterback. I just didn't like the fact that he was as raw as he was. It looked like he just had a cannon, was not accurate in any way. And even in his first season, I thought that, okay, this guy's just a running quarterback that had a cannon for an arm but couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And he's been able to take the super raw talent and turn him into one of the better premier quarterbacks in the NFL, and he's helped him be a lot more successful. And Daboll's a big reason for that. So if he can take a guy like Josh Allen and turn him into a superstar quarterback, I'm curious to see what he could do helming a team, being at the lead and being in the captain's chair, leading a team and building it in his vision, and going with what, maybe if we do keep Stafford, he is able to take his talents and bring him back and have him be the superstar again, or the next quarterback. Maybe he's able to develop a new quarterback and have him be a potential superstar. There's a lot to be excited about with a guy like Brian Daboll, for sure. There is one other name. I know you said one more, but I also have one more, and it's actually the Rams offensive coordinator, Kevin O'Connell. Sean McVay's right-hand man with that offense. He's basically turned that offense around this year. Last year, that offense was a dumpster fire. Well, Kevin O'Connell got the job this year in LA, and he's turned that offense into something that's really, really successful. They're able to throw the football at will with Jared Goff. He's rebounded that career entirely. That offense is rolling right now, and they're looking like one of the better units in the league. So, and Kevin O'Connell being what he is, I think he's a guy who could potentially right the ship in Detroit as well. I like the opportunity that would be given there. Is he my top name? No. But is he someone I would say, hey, this is an offensive-minded guy who's got some success in the past? Yeah, I would like that, absolutely. One thing I don't like about Brian Daboll is I believe he's worked under Bill Belichick before, and I don't want to touch anything related to Bill Belichick ever again. That's my one negative on him.
But yeah, like the Rams offense, they are they're borderline top 5 in terms of yards per game at 397 yards per game. There have been some inconsistent moments with them, but in general, yeah, that's a really good unit. also has a lot of talent in that unit in terms just in the receiving core alone. I do like it. I mean, you would have thought that losing Todd Gurley would have been a big blow to this offense, and they've kept firing on all cylinders. So
absolutely. Now there are two names.
There's one I want to, but you can go. There's one I want to bring up that I've seen reported in a couple different.
We may have the same
outlets.
thought here. We may have the same name. Now there's two names that I don't like.
Okay.
I'm going to go with the first one here, and it's Jim Harbaugh.
Okay.
So we do have the same name. All right.
Yep, that was the one I was going to ask you. Would you want Jim Harbaugh as the coach of the Detroit Lions?
Hell no.
I'm in agreement with you, but let me play devil's advocate.
Oh, God. Why?
Because, he's been terrible as Michigan's head coach. He hasn't won a big game in ever.
Unsuccessful,
but
to say the least.
Yeah. But if you look at his NFL career, he has a 44-19 record over the course of 4 seasons. He has 2 first-place finishes in the division. He went to the NFC Championship game 3 of the 4 seasons that he coached. He has a successful record in the NFL. Could this be a case of maybe he's a guy just more cut to be an NFL head coach than a college head coach?
There is that to be said. However, I think Jim Harbaugh has entirely lost the fire and passion to be a coach at any level, for one. That's my first point. Second point is he came into that 49ers head coaching gig with a roster that was, in all honesty, ready to win with Mike Singletary's guys. He didn't have to rebuild a roster. That's my second point. And third point is he's a guy who rubs fans, players, and executives and front office members the wrong way very quickly.
He definitely rubbed Jim Schwartz the wrong way.
Well, yes, but very quickly. So and so if we're not looking at a situation where we are ready to win 2, 3, 4 years, right, within 2, 3, 4 years, he may not be around much longer beyond that. And I don't think the Lions are 2 or 3 years away from ready to win and ready to compete. Yeah. So I think there's a lot more to build and rebuild with this roster than that. So I don't think Jim Harbaugh is the right guy for this organization in any way.
Yeah. Well,
like I said, I also just don't think he wants to coach right now.
In his defense, he did take over a 6-10 football team and went 13-3 his first season. But yes, a lot of those guys are already in place. I think it was just kind of bad coaching that caused him to be 6-10. But no, I agree with you. I don't want Jim Harbaugh. That's a nightmare in my opinion.
Right.
If he can't, there is such thing as just having lost your touch, and I think that's what's happened with Jim Harbaugh.
100%. He also, I don't think, really gets into the 21st century when it comes to the way he runs a team. Yeah. Now, the second name I wanted to bring up, and this is more of a question of, this is honestly one of the first times I've even heard about it. But I did see an article on MSN.com, and he was one of the first names mentioned. Would you give Jim Caldwell a call?
No.
Just no. Okay. All right. I like it. Let's move on. I'm in agreement. I don't think Jim Caldwell would be the guy I want running this team at all. I know make a lot.
I'll trust Jim Caldwell to bring us back to like
9-7
wild card team.
9-7.
Yeah, but like I feel bad bringing him back to bring us back to that spot and then just fire him again so he gets someone else.
Right. It would literally be taking 2 steps forward to take them right back and be back where we were to start over altogether.
Yeah. It's not a swing for the I'm going for a swing for the fences play on both ends of this. So
same here. So now I wanted to answer your question about Matthew Stafford.
Yes.
So obviously we've gotten rid of 2 of the 3 key names in this organization. We've gotten rid of the GM, the head coach, and the third name is Matthew Stafford. Andrew, I wanted to get your thoughts as well on this. Would you want to see the next Lions regime at GM and head coach retain Matthew Stafford and his talent here in Detroit as a 32-year-old quarterback with a contract kind of coming up fairly soon as well, and coming off of a year where he has seriously struggled this year? Would you like to see the Lions retain him? And I'll answer your question by saying no. I think the Lions should move on from Matthew Stafford. I would want to see the next GM draft a quarterback in this upcoming draft or whatever draft we look at. I would try to get what we can for Matthew Stafford. If we're not in a position to take one of the top-notch quarterbacks in this draft, then maybe have him as a placeholder and try to deal him at the deadline for next year and try to grab a top pick next year. I don't see Matthew Stafford as a quarterback of the future for this franchise, but I am curious to hear your thoughts on it.
For me, it largely relies on his market value, his trade value, because if I'm of the belief that I still think Stafford's at the stage of his career where you can get a solid return for him. There's teams that need a quarterback that
Cowboys.
exactly that could really use Matthew Stafford services. And for a team like the Cowboys, I think you get a nice haul.
The Bears also need a quarterback.
Bears too. I think you get a nice haul from them in return. So if you can do that and kind of jumpstart your rebuild with hopefully some nice draft picks or young pieces, yes, 100%. Move on from them. But if we're just going to end up moving on from just for the sake of moving on from them, I'd rather keep him until we at least have a young quarterback secured that he can kind of at least mentor for a year, because I do believe that's important for the quarterback position.
Is it still something that is important for the quarterback position, though? Because look at this year in particular. Quarterbacks who came in as rookies and basically were handed the keys almost right away. Justin Herbert, he didn't need to be mentored, and look at how he's playing. Joe Burrow, he didn't need to be mentored, and look how he was playing until he got hurt. Tua Tagovailoa, he sat for 5-6 games, and then he came in and the Dolphins were on a tear. I mean, there's a lot to look at and say this year alone and say, hey, maybe it's not really all that necessary for a quarterback to have to sit a year or two behind the previous guy to quote-unquote learn. Does Matthew Stafford have much to teach to a young quarterback like that? And does he have any interest in doing it? That's
we don't know his interest level, that's for sure.
So is it really necessary? Maybe not.
And then there's also the part of me that I like Matthew Stafford as a person, and I just really want him to win. And I want him to. Well,
then he better go somewhere else.
That's what I'm saying. I want him to get the recognition he deserves. I don't know if you saw Aaron Rodgers on Pat McAfee's podcast. He kind of shot out Matthew Stafford in terms of a guy who, because they were talking about Pat Mahomes and how the league goes crazy when Pat Mahomes will do a no-look pass. And Rodgers goes, yeah, because we've never done that before. And he talks about he's done that all the time. He goes, one person that does all kinds of insane, crazy passes that you would never think of that just gets no credit is Matthew Stafford. He goes in praising Matthew Stafford for 2 minutes. I'm like, I never thought Aaron Rodgers would say that, but cool. But anyway,
little interdivisional rivalry respect there. I like that.
I do feel like Matthew Stafford's a guy that deserves more respect, but he's not going to get it until he wins. And I really want him to go somewhere and win so he can get that respect. So there's part of me that's I just want him to go just so he can win because I like the guy.
I mean, I like him too. Don't get me wrong. I think he's, he does a lot for the community. Both the whole Stafford family does a lot for the community here in Detroit, obviously. I do want to see him go on and be successful somewhere. I just don't think it's going to happen here in Detroit, and I don't want him to have to stick around and become further lionized, basically. I don't want his career to be cut short because he doesn't want to play football anymore because he's been a Lion his whole life. I would like to see him be successful somewhere else. And again, if I would say that the argument for getting rid of him right now, even if it is to just move on from him, is say we do move on from him and we are a quarterback-less football team next year with a new coach and GM, well, we're probably going to end up with a really high draft pick at that point and get our quarterback of the future. So maybe there is a reason to just move on at this point. Because in all reality, your ceiling or your floor is only so low with a talented quarterback like Matthew Stafford at underneath center. So I did want to throw out a scenario to you, though. And I know we've mentioned the Cowboys and their situation there and how they need a quarterback right now. Granted, with their situation.
I do think if you're looking for draft picks, I think even though it's not as high as draft pick, I think the Bears probably more willing to go at draft capital because they legit need a quarterback solidified, whereas the Cowboys just need someone till next season.
Yeah, well, I would pump the brakes on that. The Cowboys may not bring Dak Prescott back. Well, because of the injury he had, you don't know what kind of condition he's going to return in, one. And two, his contract's up. And they weren't looking at extending him for the money he wanted. And with his leg the way it is, do they franchise tag him? Is he going to be ready for the start of the season? Are you going to waste a franchise tag on a guy who may not be ready at the start of the season? That, there's a lot of questions up in the air there. So there is possibility the Dallas Cowboys could be looking for a quarterback day one next year, before the season next year because of that. So a scenario that I saw or heard, I don't even remember where I found it, but someone had mentioned, what if the Cowboys were to let Dak Prescott walk? You traded Matthew Stafford to the Cowboys. How would you feel about the Lions then going and getting Dak Prescott to be their quarterback of the future and have that under center and then build your roster around him? It's going to be expensive. There's no doubt about it. A lot more expensive than a rookie contract, but there's also a lot more of a sure thing there.
Yeah.
How would you feel about Dak Prescott under center for the Lions?
It's just, I like Dak Prescott.
I don't.
Here's the thing. Like, every season we've seen him, he's had an insanely strong receiving core. And he's had a really good offensive line with Zeke Elliott running the ball. I'm not convinced he's going to fare as well as he has in Dallas, in Detroit. We don't have that as strong of weapons as Dallas has.
I'd argue Kenny Galladay's every bit as strong as Amari Cooper.
Yeah, but that's
stronger.
it. We don't go as deep. The Dallas Cowboys go deep.
I mean, let's be real, though. He hasn't really had that great. Yeah, but he's only had CeeDee Lamb's a rookie this year. Michael Gallup was a rookie last year, and he wasn't really that effective. Dak Prescott's been around longer than that, and he hasn't had the greatest. And they got Amari Cooper, middle of the season last year? So he hasn't really had all that great of weapons in his career, and he's still been successful.
Yeah, and he had Dez Bryant, too. He had Dez.
I don't think he ever actually had Dez.
Yeah, he did.
Then he had Dez when dude couldn't run a route to save his life, which is the only good thing Dez ever did. Because Tony Romo had good Dez. Dak Prescott did not have good Dez. Now, I will say this, though. The one thing is, and the numbers really back this up, is when Zeke Elliott is not on the field, Dak Prescott is not a good quarterback. So there is something to be said about Dak Prescott not having an elite running back with an elite offensive line helping him out. Because when Zeke's on the field, defense has to take note of it and make sure that watch out for him. So they stack the box a little bit, opening things up for wide receivers and for Dak to throw the ball. He's also very good in play action. Lions don't have that luxury. So there is that, and Dak Prescott was not very good when it came to him being either in empty backfields or Zeke just not being on the field. So there is that. I'm in the boat of I don't know what kind of health Dak's going to be in. I don't know if that leg's going to hold up, if he's going to be as mobile. And I also don't think Dak Prescott as a pure quarterback is the answer, especially at the money that it would cost to get him. So I would prefer go with a rookie quarterback on a rookie deal and build the roster around that.
I agree. I definitely agree. But I'm also on the boat of I kind of want to go the Troy Weaver route and let's shoot this thing out of a cannon and keeping some key pieces like we said, but on the whole, let's just go guns ablazing and shoot this whole team out of a cannon. I agree 100%. I think that there's this roster has so many holes in it that just there's a lot to deal with and there's not a lot of positives there. All right, move on to Pistons real quick.
Dak in 2016, Dak Prescott's top receiver would have been Cole
Probably
Beasley.
like that is Terrence Williams years, right?
Cole Beasley.
In 2016?
Yep. Actually, his top, yes, in 2016, Cole Beasley, 75 catches, 833 yards, 5 touchdowns. He had the most yards in the team. His second best receiver would have been Dez. That was a 796-yard season on 50 catches with 8 touchdowns, which is not, that's not bad. That's pretty solid. And then Jason Witten was his third best receiver. Terrence Williams was solid in there as well, but not great. So, I mean, he hasn't really had elite pass catchers before then. Now he does.
So we went deep on the Pistons moves last week, and obviously we're not gonna beat the dead horse there. But there was one interesting thing that came out over this past week that I thought we were just exploring a little bit. And there were reports that came out that the Pistons made a phone call to the Wizards regarding John Wall. And this is a simple exploratory phone call. Happens all the time, obviously. Don't read too much into it. I'm not saying a trade for John Wall is going to happen. The question I want to pose here is there what would it take for you to say, okay, it's a good move to take on John Wall's contract? Because at first I'm looking like, why the hell do we want to take on John Wall? And then I sat there and think about what could be the deal that would actually make this a good deal for the Pistons to take on John Wall's massive contract.
Tons of draft capital. That's it. Because John Wall brings a problem in twofold here. One, that contract is abysmal. Two, I would also argue that it could stunt the growth of Killian Hayes.
100%.
And that's something you do not want right now.
No.
I want Killian Hayes to be given an opportunity to grow, develop, and succeed. And with if John Wall's there and in the way, that can only happen so much. Yeah. So I don't want to see that as a potential option. So this hurts us in twofold. Now, if there's a ton of draft capital, and I'm talking first round picks involved in this, then maybe you can make an argument.
Yeah, because basically you're adding on an extra year. It's a year longer than Blake Griffin's deal, and it's $47 million for that year.
That's a chunk of change.
So the first thing is you got to take Blake Griffin off my hands.
Yes,
that's the first thing, and then you got to pay me. You got to pay me significantly to take on this contract. You're talking about me having $47 million of what I'm going to consider dead money because I don't think John Wall can contribute much to this team anyways. Because actually James Edwards, the Athletic, projects that Killian Hayes will be the starter in the first game. The season.
What else would you start there? Derrick Rose, yeah, but he's a 25-minute a game guy. You're not going to start him and have.
But he was starting, so
yeah, he's much better suited in a coming off the bench type situation where he plays 25 minutes.
But I'd want to keep that. I want to preserve having Killian Hayes as a starter. Let him learn. Absolutely. I don't want to be paying John Wall $47 million to come off the bench when we have Derrick Rose too. So
right.
So yeah, you have to give me at least 2 first-round picks. When you talk with the kind of money you're talking, you got to give me at least 2 firsts.
I don't know that a deal gets done without you including both Blake Griffin and Derrick Rose going over there. So he would kind of replace Derrick Rose. But again, are you going to want to pay John Wall $47 million to come off the bench? Because I don't want Killian Hayes coming off the bench. I want him starting to playing 35 minutes a game.
Yeah, he's more expensive than Blake Griffin this year and next year too. It's not like you're saving money the next couple of years in the balloons in 2022, 2023. No, you're talking $41 million this year, $44 million next year, $47 million the following year.
That's so much money.
Yeah,
like Jesus. 1 year of that man's life earns him almost $50 million.
Yeah,
that's insane.
It's unbelievable.
That is insane.
So it's only the teams with the most cap space can absorb this kind of money, and if the
Pistons don't have it anymore.
Yeah, but if they're moving Blake Griffin, they can create that kind of cap space. So, but yeah, again, you have to pay me 2 first-round picks, take on John Wall. Then I'd be willing to be like, okay, that could be a good trade for Troy Weaver. But yeah, it's gonna be a significant haul for Troy Weaver to even have explored this, in my opinion. There's no way he was exploring it lately. I would hope.
I would hope he hung up the phone, unless he said, wait. Here's a couple of first-round picks. Then I'd say, okay, let's talk. But no, I don't like the idea of John Wall coming here. And the biggest reason for me, in all honesty, the money, whatever. That's kind of an afterthought for me. The development of Killian Hayes is really one of the most important aspects one of the most important parts of the future of this franchise, and he needs to be able to develop and grow. And if he doesn't, I really don't think the ship's ever going to be righted here in Detroit. Yeah. There's so much weight on Killian Hayes being able to develop and becoming a player and a really solid point guard for this team. And if John Wall's here, I think it stunts the growth.
Agreed. One other question on the Pistons. So there have been a lot of season projections, like season standing projections going around for the 2021 season. And my question to you is, do you think this roster, as composed right now, is bad enough to finish bottom 5 in the league?
Yes. Yes, I do. I don't think this roster is all that great. Your best players are Jeremy Grant and Blake Griffin, and Blake Griffin's playing on one leg. And how many games is he going to play? Is he going to play 20, 30? We'll see. And Jeremy Grant, albeit is a solid player, is he a guy that can lead a team to 40 wins? No, I don't think so. So again, I think you're looking at a team that could very easily be bottom 5 next year.
Like James Edwards, the Athletic, again, he had a projected depth chart out. He had Killian Hayes at the 1, Svi at the 2, Jeremy Grant at the 3, Blake Griffin at the 4, Mason Plumlee at the 5. I think you have a giant hole at the 2 position right now. I'm not as big a fan on Svi and Mikhailuk as a lot of like the Pistons Twitter is. And then DeLon Wright, Wayne Ellington, Magruder, like it's not a shooting guard core that gives me any sort of confidence there.
No.
But
Wayne Ellington's a solid bench too.
Yeah, exactly. We brought him back for that reason.
Yeah.
Blake Griffin, I don't know, is he going to stay healthy?
Probably not.
And if he doesn't, you're looking at if you're looking at a front court of Mason Plumlee, and they probably moved Jeremy Grant to the 4 and put Saku at the 3, I would think. We're not deep. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, there's very little depth, and in all honesty, there's not a lot of height on this team either. Like, there's not height in terms of how tall they are, but there's not a lot of there's not a very high ceiling of talent on this roster. Like, Blake Griffin isn't the same player he used to be, so his ceiling has come down. Jeremy Grant's ceiling isn't superstar level high either. He was a role player on a good team last year. It's a situation where I don't sure he could blossom here based on necessity, but how good is he really? You know, I like the signing of Jeremy Grant. I do think we gave him too much money, but again, I don't think he's going to compete with the likes of the Oladipos, the biggest names out there that would really be players to build around. So I don't think the ceiling is very high with this team.
No, I agree with you. I do think, just given the kind of opportunity I feel like Jeremy Grant is going to have here, I think there's a chance he can put up. I'm not going to say he's going to make the team, but there's a chance that he could put up like all-star consideration type numbers.
It's
so
the
like,
it's what I call the Brandon Jennings effect.
Yeah, and so like there's that. But I love the tenacity he's going to bring the defensive end. But this team is devoid of offense. I think we're going to actually be a solid defensive team, to be honest with you.
We very could
this
be.
Season,
there's a lot of length there.
We're devoid of offense.
Yes. And when I say the Brandon Jennings effect, I liked Brandon Jennings. Let me preface things by saying that. I liked Brandon Jennings. I thought he was fun to watch. I liked him as a player. But he is a guy who, in all honesty, was he ever really a top 5, top 10 point guard in the league? No. Never. And even with Milwaukee, he was good, but he was never that great. But he put up really solid numbers because he had to. And
he was
had
best
to here
right before he tore his Achilles.
Right, and he had to here in Detroit too. He was the best, one of the better players in the team. So they asked him to do a lot, and he was able to successfully do it. But he was never one of the top point guards in the league. And I think the same is going to be with Jeremy Grant. They're going to ask him to do a lot, but I don't think he's ever going to be one of the top forwards in the league or even close to it. So he's going to put up some solid numbers, but is he really going to be that great if other really good talent was around him? No.
All right, final question. This is one I saw circulating on Twitter the other day, and it was a question of what would you rather see happen? The Pistons land Cade Cunningham in the draft this season, or miss out on Cade Cunningham but land Emoni Bates in 2022?
I want Emoni Bates. I'll miss out on Cade Cunningham to grab Emoni Bates. You could be looking at the next version of like Zion or LeBron with Emoni Bates. Like you could be looking at the guy of the future. They're
both super versatile guys.
They are.
They're both 6'8". Cade Cunningham's a 6'8" but I think you can play him at the 2. From what I've seen, that he's very capable of playing the 2. Emoni Bates is a 6'8" who I think is also capable of playing the 2. So
I being the hometown guy, I think it's just that storyline, and I think he's just such a special talent. I want Emoni Bates here in a Pistons uniform.
Now, if you found a way to get both, I think you're contenders again.
Oh my God, you're immediately a contender. You have your 2 superstars right away.
Yeah.
Oh God, that would be amazing. Could you imagine?
Yeah.
Killian Hayes dishing the ball to both those guys. Ooh. Oh my. Yeah, you could be looking at being championship contenders within like a year of having both those guys on the roster.
OKC is going to get them both, right?
Yeah, probably. They have about 40 first round draft picks. They're going to just trade them all for the number 1 pick in both straight drafts.
That was my strategy in 2K when I was doing.
Just get all the draft picks and then trade for the number 1. I
hoarded draft picks. I just kept trading to the top of the drafts I liked and getting my guys.
Yep, that's what you do. It's the video game philosophy. That's what they did, and it's going to work. And it pisses me off.
Oh man. But yeah, that's all I got.
That's it for tonight, too. That's it for me as well. So thank you guys for listening and sticking with us a little bit longer than normal. We just had a lot to talk about today.
I mean, it's just a really big week. Let's be honest.
It is a really
here.
big week.
This is the week everyone's been waiting for. It's like the release of Avengers Endgame for film nerds. All right,
pretty much, yeah. I compared to that for sure. But Andrew, thank you for joining me, and thank you to Detroit Sports Podcast as well, and thank you guys for listening. This has been the Fan Report. Bye, fans.
For fans.
We will catch you guys next week. Follow us on Twitter at Real Fan Report, and check out our fantasy podcast, The Fanalists, that is also on wherever you can find Detroit Sports Podcast episodes for DFS advice, lineup advice, everything, waiver advice, everything out there you can.
But if for some reason you can't find it, again, you can just go to our Twitter. We'll retweet there at Real Can Report.
Yep, it's always posted on Twitter. So, but thank you guys again. We'll catch you next week. Have a good one.
Peace.